Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back again giving you guys some more high quality education and quality information. Same quality twice. Why not? All right, today we're going to be expanding on our kingdom management series and going into probably one of the most important parts of how a kingdom develops, if not the most important part, which is how the kingdom starts. And if you want to be in a position to contribute to having a successful kingdom, these are some things I think that kingdoms have to be able to do if you're going to go in managing. Now, a lot of what I'll be talking about will adhere more towards if you're going in with a prearranged group, i.e. a jump group or other. However, even if there are no groups in there, this is something that you can work towards. And I'll also do another video kind of on how to work on communicating and establishing relationships with other alliances in the beginning. But just for the most part, to kind of lay some of the groundwork, we're going to be touching on Zone 1 today. And we're going to be talking about the 18 alliance method / the 1/3 Zone 1 split method. And I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons, or I should say some of the benefits from this, and why I believe truly this is the way that the game should be finally starting in, is probably the better way. Not really trending in, but just more so starting in, because there just doesn't really seem as though there's a starting place for any kind of kingdom management. So hopefully this will be a really good educational video explaining and really more so doing a deep dive into my previous video on kind of the best way to build a kingdom. So before we get started, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and if you want to be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the description / pinned comment below. So what we're going to touch on today, like I said, is Zone 1. So we're going to be talking about how you can go about developing a Zone 1 in your kingdom, and why is it that I specifically recommend kingdoms to start off doing a 1/3 split. So it goes back to what I was saying in the previous video that I'll briefly touch on, which is, right, you're looking for player activity and retention. The most important part of any kingdom is to have as many active players as possible. That's what everyone wants. Nobody wants the kingdom to start out and then, okay, well, we only need 2 alliances in Zone 3, so we only care to have 300 active players. Like, I've never heard anyone say that. That makes absolutely no sense. You want to have as much activity as humanly possible. Now, there's obviously some ways or different ways that you can go about increasing activity and thereby sustaining players for a long period of time from, i.e. retaining them. However, Zone 1 is the most important part of that. Zone 1 will determine, for pretty much all intents and purposes, what your baseline is, building to then further zones. What I mean by that is, depending on how many alliances your Zone 1 has for each of the 6 provinces that is able to emerge, be active, that stays in, whether they fight, they war or not, they do the peace route, they're cutting off flag lines, whatever it may be, all of those factor into how you're going to progress as a kingdom, right? Remember, we're talking about kingdom, right? Global, not local. We're thinking about how can we get the most out of a kingdom, not get the most for your alliance. That's the biggest difference here. You really have to change up your entire mindset and approach to kingdom builders, right? This is really a team game, because you can't just go and win a KVK with one alliance, right? For all intents and purposes, you need multiple alliances, therefore a lot of players, more than just 150, 160, whatever it may be, in order to actually go and do something, or I should say have advantages going into your KVK. And nobody wants to play in a kingdom, in my opinion, with just 150 players. Like, to me, that just wouldn't be fun. Maybe to a smaller group, if you're in a kingdom like that and you're just, grinding out MGE wins all day long. Okay, maybe. But I just don't really believe in kind of being in a booster kingdom like that if you're not, playing in a home one, right? There's certain needs for those, and maybe we'll make a video on it later. Though for this, those are the baselines we're operating off of, is how can we keep the most amount of players active from the start of the game. Now remember, when you're playing RoK, for a lot of the new players that are coming into a kingdom, which the majority of players in a kingdom are new, right? The minority are the veterans. The minority are the jumpers, are the people that have been playing for a while. And because of this, that's one. And because of this, we have to approach how we do things in the game from a kind of beginner mentality of how are we explaining things to people? Why are we doing things the way we are? Because we cannot assume that these other players know everything that we know. Right? So we kind of have to operate in more of a kind of Switzerland, I don't know if I want to say beginner staging, but just introductory. That's probably a better way of putting it. An introductory approach. Okay, now let's get into how would you actually do your 18 alliance / your 1/3 split. So, and I touched on this a little bit before, but I'll kind of just give a quick overview here, is you would want to do, like, there's 6 altars, which are these big cone cylinder looking things. And then you have, I think it's a hexagon. This is why I should have paid attention when they were doing shapes in math class. Or geometry, whatever it was. And then you have the spindles here, which is your sanctums. Now, there are 6 altars and 12 sanctums per province, with the exception, I think, of one province which has 13 for an odd number. But in short, if you're thinking about how can you split these up in a way where you can give the most amount of alliances a good amount, but not too much and not too little, because remember, the objective is to keep as many players active and retained throughout your Zone 1 as you're going into prep for Zone 2. So to do that, my recommendation, it kind of goes into my 18 alliance 1/3 split, is you split the provinces into thirds. An example would be if you're looking at these 2 here and then you have these 4, you might say something like, okay, well, I'll go from this corner path all the way here, right? And then I'll go, because you got 2 altars here, or excuse me, 1 altar here, right? You got 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I'll do something where I go here, and then I'll go here around and like down here. And then that way, this space here would be for the middle, right? You figure it out that way. The reason why is each alliance would get 2 altars. They get 4 sanctums. They would each get at least 1 pass, right? And ways that you can split it up is you could say, well, these adjacent alliances will split the Zone 1 adjacent passes 1 and 1, right? And then they get 1 level 2. For odd numbers here, right, where you have 4, this is kind of ideal, or if you have 5 or even 6 sometimes, you give 2 level 2 passes to the middle, and then the one over here on the right would get 1 level 1 and then 1 level 2, right? I mean, again, you have to try and think about how to even it out as best you can. But these are ways that you can do that, where one, what does this allow to do? If we split the region, if we split the province into thirds, we allow for 3 emerging alliances per province, which would give us 18 active alliances total. It shows that, number 2, everyone is getting the same amount, so no one is getting more and no one is getting less. That is fair, regardless if whoever feels entitled less or more so than another. It is fair, so you have that as a selling point. Number 3 is that it allows for groups to then start working in a cohesive manner with each other in kind of the small pond, which is your province that you're in. That means that each of the 3 alliances have to work on a few things. They have to work on coordinating and making sure that their territory is within their 1/3 allocated area. So that takes some diplomacy coordination between one member of an alliance and the other alliance, right? That's a way that you can start building some rapport. You communicate, you're establishing a bond. Awesome. Number 2, it also possibly requires the leaders to communicate with each other so they can talk and discuss about how to kind of govern the province, as far as like within whatever guidelines have been set, if there's some kind of overarching body, or just how they want to operate together, right? How are they working with smaller alliances? Are they going and handling kind of disputes? Are they quelling any kind of attacks or mini skirmishes that are happening? Almost think of it as though if you were given a plot of land, here's 100 people that you have to manage, and you kind of have to deal with a lot of these things. These are good learning steps to build up to what you will eventually do when you expand that diplomacy and those conversations beyond your province, when you look to Zone 2, and then even more so when you look to Zone 3, and even more so than that when you look to the entire kingdom as a whole. So these are really great, what I refer to as building blocks, where you start off small, you get a little taste for it, and then you work on it over a period of time. I think these are really important to do, and in my opinion, really a lost skill that isn't necessarily focused on as much on how you can actually make the most out of your time when you're starting out. So again, under this system, this is how you would start off working on some of these things. I think in addition to that, it also shows, maybe as a third or fourth point, is that it shows to the kingdom, but starting off to your province, that you are attentive, you're engaged, you're paying attention to what's happening there, and you care about reaching out and addressing players appropriately when things happen or when they come up. So then you apply that times 6 to each of the other provinces, and now you're really starting to get some good building blocks established. And the way that you would distribute territory, in my opinion, is you do it based on, right, remember, the first couple of days, everyone's going to kind of be, for the most part, figuring things out. They're going to place CS where they want. There's probably going to be some movement. There'll be some clashing with CS. People might have to move. Moving early sometimes is better than moving later, if you have to rebuild or just flag out somewhere until you can rebuild. But typically you would give the top 3 strongest alliances that are active and emerging from a province a allocated 1/3 territory, right? That's typically how you would do it to try and put yourself in the best position going forward. So my recommendation is you try and do that. Now, let's say you don't necessarily have that. What you can do is you can look at other provinces. Maybe you have one province that's really overloaded, and they have 5 or 6 just really strong alliances that are within the top whatever, right? One option could be advising 1 or 2 of those alliances, or however many, to move to a maybe weaker or a less populated province. And that way you are addressing something without immediately having to then consider doing something like a merge, or just worst case, Hunger Games battle royaling it out. And that can really cause more problems than not. Sometimes it may be unavoidable. However, that's only if you have yet to actually exhaust all the other options. So you work on these things in your Zone 1. And then from here, now you're starting to kind of flag out. You're trying to figure out where you're going to go. In the beginning, do not expect it to be perfect, right? Unless you're coming in with a big organized group and you already have plans and you're reaching out to people ahead of time. The high-level overview I'm giving you right now is almost as though assuming you do not have an organized group. You just have individual alliances that are coming in, and this is how you can operate and act and coordinate with one another. So you reach out early. And you would do this on, maybe a couple days in, right? Maybe day 1, day 2 at the soonest. And then you introduce yourself, you reach out, you see if people are okay with going forward. Because that's the big thing, right? You have to sell people on something. And that takes a lot of work. And that probably is going to be another video for another time, because there's a lot that can really be said about that. But this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to build something and get some level of coordination and grouping together. And that is going to require for you and anyone else to reach out to leads, to officers, maybe get them in a Discord server, maybe get them in an in-game group chat, and you have to talk about these things. If you don't have a Discord, maybe you set up multiple in-game group chats that each have different topic points. That's a nice little workaround there. Otherwise, if you can get on Discord, you can set up different topic channels. I think that's really important because it helps break apart the conversation. So that way you're not having, 10 different topical conversations in one chat channel. And again, I'll probably do another expanded version on that because, as I said, there is a lot that goes into that. And so I think it's important when it comes to knowing how you can approach and attack that, have a good action plan going forward. But by doing these things and working on establishing your 18 alliances, right, that you want to try and have as your kind of general good rule of thumb, is that will allow for you to carry over and convert to later zones, therefore giving you the most amount of activity and the most amount of player retention that you can. And now with the smaller alliances, remember, when we say that you're getting a 1/3 territory that's being allocated within a Zone 1 province, that does not mean that you have to own or flag out to every single corner or inch of that territory. It can be good and it can be healthy for you to allow maybe 1 to 2 alliances, give or take, and opportunities to maybe build along the perimeter, for example, doing things that don't necessarily, like flagging in a way that doesn't really impact them cutting something off from you or taking away maybe needed or necessary RSS deposits. But it gives them the opportunity to do what? Play the game. That's the most important thing, is that all players and all alliances want to play the game. And part of playing the game is if you're in an alliance, you want to flag, you want to gain territory, you want to try and get structures, you want to advance in zones. So the important thing to always keep in the back of our mind is that we have to realize that players want to play the game. And if they're immediately denied the opportunity to actually play the game in any of its facets, that causes people to leave, it causes people to re-roll, it causes people to stop playing. And that all factors into your overall player drop-off that every kingdom has, and it directly will factor into how much activity you're going to have in the beginning and how many players are actually going to stay retained throughout the beginning of the kingdom. So there's so many things that go in, and don't get me wrong, you will always lose players. That will always happen. You cannot please everyone. You cannot include 100 alliances in Zone 3, Zone 2, or Zone 1, right? That just isn't realistic. But what you can do is set up alliances and players opportunities to be successful, to identify those contributing, those active, those engaging, those emerging alliances and players that do want to be a part of the kingdom and they want to play the game. And you're trying to set up and give them the best environment to do so. Okay, that pretty much sums up what I feel about Zone 1. Actually, man, there's a bunch of stuff I covered this video that I didn't cover in the last one. Probably just because I was trying to put myself in the mindset of starting out from Zone 1, because there is a lot, and I'm sure I didn't even cover every single thing, but just more so parts that focus tunneled, if you will, on to how to maximize, right, 18 alliances by splitting up your Zone 1 provinces into thirds. So I hope those of you enjoyed this video, and of course, if you have any thoughts, comments, if you've been in a kingdom that maybe has tried something like this, but maybe not to this extent, if you have thoughts or questions on its viability, right, if you just want to share your feedback on, why or why not you think it may or may not work, even though I don't know if that was the best way to say that, please let me know in those comments down below. That is it for me. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later.